the worst part about a cancer diagnosis is waiting.
Yes.
You're always waiting for results of tests. You're waiting for an appointment with a doctor. You're waiting.
Welcome to Coach Soul, the podcast where we explore therapeutic ways to the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Steve Hudgins. I'm a licensed professional counselor dedicated to helping you navigate life's challenges. In each uplifting episode, we'll discuss mental health, relationships, self-care, emotional well-being, and personal growth. Join me and with my co-host, Kenya Evelyn, a therapeutic life coach, where sometimes we'll even welcome special guests to our show that share their experience and expertise. So let's embark on this transformative path together and discover a healthier and happier you. Hey, welcome to Coach Soul. And we're going to talk about a difficult medical topic, and it's the word cancer. And a lot of it, we tend to ignore because the word cancer can be scary for a lot of people. I've got a special guest, a veteran. He has a lot of different hats like I have worn myself. It's interesting how we can collaborate on military, photography, and book writing. And Glenn Sturm, thank you for being our special guest today on our show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, Glenn, tell us a little bit about this military background of yours.
Well, it was an extraordinary thing. My dad was a career Army officer, and I went to 12 schools growing up. Dad was a World War II vet, and then he got out of the military after fighting the Battle of the Bulge, being a company commander, and for a short time battalion commander in the Battle of the Bulge as a 19 to 20-year-old. And then goes to college, gets his degrees, and gets out and is getting ready to go into business. And lo and behold, something called the Korean War started. And Dad was recalled to active duty for that. And he commanded a Ranger company in the Korean War and decided to stay in. And so, it was a wonderful thing for him. He was a great Army officer. He's in the Infantry Hall of Fame. I think they actually call it the Hall of Honor at Fort Benning. But because of the amount of time I had traveled, I decided that I wasn't going to go into the military. And then back when I was at the appropriate age, we had something called the draft. And I had a draft lottery number of 33. So I had a choice between accepting an ROTC scholarship or going to Vietnam as a private. And so I decided to take the ROTC scholarship, which paid for my university. And the other thing that happened was they gave us a GRE exam when I was finishing up. I did well enough on that to get a fellowship, and the Army paid while I was on active duty for my master's in business. So that's where it started. I got out of the Army after 4 years because they wouldn't let me command anymore. I had 3 years as a company commander, and they said I couldn't have another command assignment. And so I got out, and a friend of mine convinced me to go back into the reserves. And I stayed in the reserves it depends on how you count it, but 37 total years of active in reserves. So lots of jobs, lots of different things. But my main job was to be a servant leader, to take care of my soldiers, and reporting to more and more senior people the longer I was in.
Glenn, that's remarkable because it's a similar story. My dad was 26 years in the Air Force, worked in the security police department, and, a lot of stories there. Like you, I went to college, but decided not to go into the military. Economic situation back in the 90s caused me to rethink about things. And I went in 92, right before the Gulf War had ended, and I got into telecommunications. And so it's fascinating to be able to hear a journey here of military families not wanting to be military, but yet something draws us in whether by choice or not, and we begin to serve. I heard about your book, Warriors Hate War. What drove you to write that book?
Well, the book um, is an analysis of the U.S. military from World War II to through the end of Gulf II, and my assertion is that we've basically lost every engagement except for the first Gulf War. And the reason is there's something called the PAL doctrine, where we used in Gulf War Gulf War One. And what General Powell did was he outlined 8 factors that if you followed them, you're not going to have a problem. You're going to win. So, General Powell learned this through the Vietnam War, and he saw the problems we had in Vietnam and the reasons for those problems. So one of the issues is you've got to decide you're going to win and then go to win. And what happens is the best way to win is with overwhelming might that is supported by our own country and by other countries. And when you do that, you reduce casualties and you win the war quickly. Well, in the second Gulf War, Rick Shinseki, who was the chief of staff of the Army at the time, decided that we needed 500,000 troops to win both the ground battle and the aftermath. And Donald Rumsfeld thought we needed 125,000 to 150,000. Well, Rick was right and Rumsfeld was wrong, because what happened was we won the war, but we lost the peace. And General Rumsfeld made mistakes that were made by General Marshall, then General Eisenhower after World War II, but the mistake was not made by General MacArthur. And that was Rumsfeld outlawed the hiring of anybody from the Ba'ath Party after the war. Well, when you have all your school teachers had to be members of the Ba'ath Party. So all the school teachers were gone. Lots of doctors were gone. The police were gone. And then all the enlisted folks and the junior officers were gone because you had to be a member of the Ba'ath Party. Well, what happens then is you've got all these people who have guns, have ammunition, and are being supported by the generals who had money. So that brought on the insurgency. Well, after World War II, we had the same insurgency problem initially in Europe. But MacArthur didn't have the insurgency problem because he basically disobeyed Marshall's order. And at a certain point, Eisenhower talked to MacArthur about it and said, how have you fixed this problem? He said, don't tell me you're following that crazy order. Who's running your sewage systems? Who's running your garbage pickups? Who's running the police? Well, General Eisenhower took it a step further than MacArthur did, is he turned over the judicial systems in 1946 to the Germans. And so what happened was the Germans then went after the bad Germans. And then you have the great recovery that happened in Germany thereafter because the Germans were now in charge of their own destiny. And the bad people were gone, but the good people were left to run their country. And so the whole theory behind that I wrote in Warriors Hate War is, as a warrior, you don't want somebody to give you an order that leads to destiny of failure. And that's what's been going on. We haven't been trying to win the wars, and if we won the war, we lost the peace because we didn't look at history and what happened in history.
It's fascinating history. If we would just take the time to study, right, and not repeat. And it just seems like in today's situation, we're doing the same thing. We're repeating bad behaviors and things, and we're not getting very far advanced as we should. Glenn, it's fascinating that here you are, you get into the military and you get out. What did you do after you got out? I know you shared that, hey, you went to the reserves, but you finished your master's, but then what?
Well, for the first 18 months, I went into business and did very well. I was promoted 4 times in 18 months. But there were some ethical issues I didn't like in the company I worked for. I'm not going to repeat it. They're not in existence anymore, but they had some rules that were not advantageous to promoting the best business behaviors. And so I always wanted to own my own companies, and I come from a military family. So how do you do that? Well, I wasn't trained to do that. I was trained basically to be an Army officer. So I went to law school and ended up doing pretty well. When I got out of law school, 2.5, 3 years after I was out of law school, I was at a major firm, and I made partner in the firm, quite early. And at the 6-year mark, I was made the corporate chairman of the firm, and I was also made a member of our firm's executive committee, which basically was the governing body of the firm. We did all the compensation issues and the expansion issues. And I was there for 25 years. And the whole time I was there, I was either the corporate chairman or one of the principal members of our firm's executive committee. I did IPOs, did corporate securities transactions. And then when I got diagnosed with cancer, which was, I don't know how you found out about your cancer, but I had a phone call. I was at the airport going to the University of North Carolina to give a speech. And I was running triathlons those days and marathons. And it was my doctor, and my doc said, I was at gate B13 in the Atlanta airport. And my doctor said, Glenn, the biopsies came back. It was on January 21st, 2009. And she said, he came back positive for lymphoma. And I said, what biopsies? And they had done them in early December, and they just got the results. And so what happened was the first year after the diagnosis, through the end of that year, the cancer was continuing to get worse. And I had just been doing oral cancer chemo. And I was told that I'd be going on to IV chemo 3 days a week, every 3 weeks at Yale. And the insurance companies had heard of this thing called cancer-related cognitive impairment, or chemo brain. And I was doing multi-billion-dollar transactions, and they didn't have anything to do with me doing those kinds of transactions on chemo. And so I was put on disability. And at the age of 54, I was forced into retirement. So that was the start of the journey.
No, I mean, it's you get the call. It was Friday the 13th in October of 2013. 13 just not a good number.
It's not a good number. No, it's not.
And I get a phone call. It was 7:30 on a Friday night, and the doc had said, "Hey, we have cancer, a diagnosis. We need you to come in. We need you to get a CT scan." And, Glenn, I was in the middle of transitioning from leaving telecommunications engineering field, getting into the mental health field. And at this time, she's like, we need to go. And the CT scan confirmed 2 large, nodules that came back to positive cancer. And you just sit on that phone call, and you're in shock, disbelief, not knowing where to go. I can't imagine what you were dealing with on your phone call.
Well, it was, I didn't know. I in my first book on cancer, it's called The Call. And you don't know what to do. I mean, I got on the plane and flew from Atlanta to Raleigh, and then went over and made the presentation. Got on a plane, flew back. This time it didn't take 5 weeks to get the results. It took a couple of days. But then most people don't understand this. But the worst part about a cancer diagnosis is waiting.
Yes.
You're always waiting for results of tests. You're waiting for an appointment with a doctor. You're waiting. And waiting doesn't do any good. I had nodules on my lungs and on my spine, which are still there. And it just is what it is. And you got to think about it. And when I had a Caring Bridge site that I started because I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. So I communicated with people by writing about it. And I said, I don't know how long I get, but I'm not going to let cancer define me. Absolutely, I'm not. I'm going to do as good as I can do for as many people for as long as I've got. And I'm going to celebrate life. And so I came up with some fun little things to do, like to take my mind off of it. I made it a mission to put a smile on somebody's face every day, especially if they were having a bad day.
Mm.
And by putting a smile on their face, it put a smile on my face. Then there's this great phrase: "We must all give up hope for a better yesterday." We've got the disease. There's nothing we can do about it. The only thing we can do is make the world a better place for as long as we've got. And when you start changing the attitude from the negative, which is so overwhelming to start with, to finding a way to do something positive, it changes the outcome of what you're doing. I mean, it changed the outcome of cancer. I mean, I was in an extremely high stress position, and all of a sudden the stress was gone from that. But I had the new stress, which is called cancer. But I wasn't going to fall into the same trap again. So I was going to make it as good as I could get.
No, and no one's ever prepared for a bombshell like this, and I find humor in this because you and I are military, Army. What's the old saying? Hurry up and wait. And so it seemed like the military training trained us for this moment of hurry up and wait for the diagnosis and the treatment and so forth. And
yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, and you learn things. One of the other things I learned was when people ask you, "How you doing?" That's not a question. That's a greeting. They don't want to hear it. So you give them the same answer. "I'm doing great."
It's fascinating because, I've had maybe one person or a family that had cancer. I've been fortunate in the gene zone that way, but, heart disease is the other issue. But, I'm been blessed through God in being able to get through what I have. In 2013, I had gone into remission for 5 years, and then all of a sudden, it just popped back in 2017 and going through some health in that way. And it's devastating because going through some health issues, the spouse that I'd been married to had left. The switching from a candidacy to try to go full license was a hardship because the state changed the way that we were to be classified as a full one. They wanted to go back to school. So there's a lot of things that were happening, but the stress that it puts on us also just magnifies the cancer cells in itself. You wrote the book, The Call, but at the same time, when you think about how you dealt with your cancer, what were your thoughts when they were introducing, hey, we can go chemical based here and try to help with your cancer?
Well, I mean, I was very, very lucky. My insurance company just was so good. It was unbelievable. I never went to the VA.
Wow.
But for instance, I had a really bad bicycle accident. I used to race bicycles. And so in the year before I got diagnosed, we had a bike race. It's called La Toja. It's 203 miles, 8,000 or 7,000 feet of climbing through 3 states in the Mountain West in one day. Well, my team finished 5th that year. Well, I was bound and determined that we were going to improve on that the following year. And so I was just screaming at the start of the race. And I was feeling so good, so wonderful. Everything was going great. And I remember thinking about how, my gosh, this is unbelievable. I'm just flying. And the next thing I remember, I'm in an ambulance. I've been unconscious for 45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And I had a crushed helmet, a crushed collarbone. And in the emergency room, they told me I had something called a hemothorax. And I didn't know what that was, but it didn't sound good. Well, out here in Wyoming, my other teammates, found the hospital I was at, came to help me, and they, got a vehicle and drove me back. Well, they gave me some Tylenol and a sling to keep my arm in. Well, the next day was a Sunday, and I had to fly to Hartford, Connecticut, then drive a car down to New Haven. And that's a long flight because you're in the Mountain West. You got to change a couple of planes, and then you get there. And I was having a hard time breathing a little bit in the last 30 minutes of the flight. So the next morning, I go in to see my principal oncologist, and she said, "Glenn, why's your arm in a sling?" And I said, "Well, I crushed my collarbone. I had a pretty big wreck on my bike on Saturday." She said, "Where's the CT? I know you always carry your stuff with you." I said, "They didn't do one."
Oh, wow. She
coded me, and I'd had an ischemic watershed stroke as a result of low blood pressure in my brain. I've recovered completely, but it was just like it's called cascading in aviation, when you have one mistake after another mistake after another mistake. And those mistakes came to roost last year because in the integrated multidiscipline approach to taking care of cancer, which has just been so successful, the most important thing is communication. All the team members need to communicate so that everybody has the same level set of the information. Well, Dr. Foss at Yale said, "Glenn, why didn't they call me?" And I said, "I don't know. I have no clue. It's just incredible that they didn't call you. They had your phone number. They've got your email address. They called every other time. Right. Why didn't they call this time? Don't know." Well, that came back to roost last year because I put my own team together, and I was kind of because I was a tax, I did tax and other things, but I had experts around me when I was doing my deals. So it was normal for me to put a team together. Well, last year, it turned out that and they did an MRI in January, and it showed that I had a tumor on L3 root nerve, and the pain was extraordinary. And on May 29th, they gave me some medicine here without talking to my docs at Yale, having their phone numbers, having their email addresses, and it caused a multi-factor drug interaction problem that threw me into ketoacidosis and almost killed me. Wow. Because they didn't talk. Well, you cannot understand how critical it is today for the professionals to talk to each other. The other thing is a complete care team. I talked about the psychiatrist a little while ago about the importance of addressing, narcolepsy, which a lot of cancer patients have, and chemo brain, which a lot of cancer patients have. But there are all sorts of other issues that you've got. And so the team ranges from a medical oncologist all the way down to a music therapist. I mean, the consensus is there are 30 people on the team. Right. Now, you may only use 5 or 6 of them, but you may need all of them. And like I was saying, my insurance company paid, after the bicycle wreck, paid for me to have physical therapy 5 days a week in-house for 10 years. And that's what got me back. completely.
It's amazing story. And, I want to get into a part 2 with you because I think it's important what you shared that a lot of people are not aware of, and that's communication. I've got a story about the VA in regard to the treatment that has happened there. And you were very fortunate to have insurance that covered that. We're out of time. But I do think this is a critical moment that I want our listeners to tune back into because Glenn's got a lot of wealth of information to share. And we're going to talk about the variety of treatments. And so until next time, take care and God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on Coach Soul. As we wrap up, we want to remind our listeners of a few key points. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content shared here is based on professional opinion but may not apply to everyone's situation. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your mental health care. If you're in a crisis, please seek immediate professional help or contact a crisis hotline. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship. For personal advice, please consult with your licensed mental health professional in your area. Remember, your mental health journey is unique. While we hope this information is helpful, it is crucial to work directly with the qualified personnel for your specific needs. Thank you again for tuning in to Coach Soul, and we'll see you next time.